Thank you, Sally, and can I just echo a warm welcome to everybody for this latest happy hour session. And can I first of all just extend thanks to all the speakers for joining us, and I shall introduce you all shortly. But really delighted that we were able to put the spotlight on putting people at the heart of the new housing development, co-producing the place we call home, because it's an excellent guide that was published last month, and it feels only yesterday, but I know Claire and I were just talking earlier, it feels, where's the last month gone? But it's great that we can put the spotlight, and we got a great set of speakers to present on that. But this happy hour session would not be made possible, not just because of the speakers, but also the UKRI Healthy Ageing Challenge, who support the LIN, so that we could bring you sort of cutting edge for good practice, research and policy developments throughout the year. And if you haven't already spotted, this is actually the first of two happy hour sessions that we're running this week. It's sort of a break from the usual, where we only have one on a Tuesday, but we look forward to sort of giving you a bit more information about another happy hour session that we're running on Thursday afternoon at this time. But we're going to have I think we have about 180 people registered for this session. So we may still have a few more people joining us for the remainder of this afternoon. But I wanted to sort of just kick off by welcoming Julie Ogley, Director of Social Care, Health and Housing at Central Bedfordshire Council. She'll be followed by Gillian Kelly, who's the ADASS East Region Support Officer for Market Shaping and Commissioning. Delighted that Claire Asprey, Head of Strategy and Development at Luton Borough Council, could join us. An independent co-producer, Mark Dale, who's very much actively involved in the production of the guide. And we're going to put the spotlight also on a particular case study that didn't come out of East of England, but a good practice example from Wandsworth and Richmond Borough Councils with Rachel Wood and Jaquel Runnels, or Jax for short. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Julie, who I know has taken time out of her busy schedule just on the eve of the ADASS annual conference to join us not from Central Bedfordshire, but from Manchester. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Jeremy, and good afternoon, everybody, from a rather dismal and wet and grey Manchester, but that's how it is. So I usually start by saying I've got the best job in local government. I'm the Director of Adult Social Care and Housing, and it's been an absolute delight to have that role for 13 years now in Central Bedfordshire. And it's also been a delight to work with the East of England ADASS region, and to sort of over the years look at how we could think about bringing together housing and adult social care. And we've had some setbacks and we've had some success. But it felt to us about 12 or so months ago that the timing was just right to think about housing and how we could make that link with social care, and equally importantly, how we can involve those people that would actually be living in housing. So trying to think about co-production. So next slide, please. So I mentioned that I thought the timing was right. So we have the Adult Social Care White Paper, and if you've read that, then you will see the emphasis it puts on housing and technology as well. But that made us sit back and think, are we ready? You know, where are we? And for some of my colleagues in two-tier councils, that was a real struggle with the county and the districts with different responsibilities, each of them. And what I've become aware of over the years is the very different levels of understanding. So in the East of England, there are only 3 out of the 12 directors of adults who've actually got housing responsibilities as well. And it's a whole new, what would you call it? A whole new subject area to think about, but absolutely fundamental. You know, where people live really does have the most important impact on people's outcomes and how they progress through their lives. And trying to get that message across to colleagues about, if you're Director of Adults, you have to think about housing. You know, we've seen it in the white paper, and don't we just know that anyway? And for many of us, we've sort of thought about supported housing, or we support about what we might call independent living or extra care. But my plea to any director is to think about the whole housing market across all tenures and across all sorts. So we've had, as I said, over the years, a number of forays to try and bring together district colleagues, housing association colleagues, with county colleagues and unitaries to try and learn about what's the art of the possible. But I think there is a question for us, Jeremy, really, and that is, do we know what good looks like? You know, what is a good strategy? What is a good approach? Who are our partners? Who needs to be involved? And you might have heard me say before, but I've come to really appreciate planners. You know, as a social worker, I never thought I'd want to get up close and pally with the planners in the council. But I can tell you that they're a great set of colleagues. And if you explain what it is you're trying to achieve, will greatly assist us in trying to carry out our responsibilities. And so we've had a group of colleagues. I'm thinking about Les in Thurrock, and I'm thinking about Claire, who you're going to meet later, that over the years we've been talking about, well, what could we do? What can we learn from one another? Do we learn from one another? You know, and how might we tackle this? So my colleagues, Jill, Claire and Mark, are going to talk to you about the approach we developed for ADASS East, which has led to the document that the Good Practice Guide that Jeremy mentioned, and they're going to talk about. But really, we've done this now, we've produced this Good Practice Guide. We think that it stands the region in good stead, and we hope other colleagues will look at it as well. But for us now, of course, we're always striving, it's what next? And I really welcome your comments as we go through this afternoon. And you know, you may well help us in the East of England work out what it is we want to do next. So I think, Jeremy, that's all I want to say by way of opening.
Well, Julie, thanks ever so much. And I think you set the context really well, both in relation to the white paper, and I'm also conscious that a former president of the region also talked about every decision about care as a decision about housing. And again, this is very much at the heart of this document. And part of that sort of market shaping also links in neatly to one of the sort of primary sort of people behind the scenes who helped the team put this together, which is Gillian. So Gillian Kelly, you know, the issue about market shaping and how we look at commissioning and looking at those new models and what that art of the possible is. Let's just look at some of those lessons with you for now. So over to you, Gillian.
Oh, thanks so much, Jeremy. And I just want to say, you know, I think it's fantastic that the directors of adult social services in the East have wanted to drive this whole piece of work on housing, because so often, you know, as Julie just said, there's this huge disconnect. And it's been really, really exciting to work in the East, because there's just been such a head of steam. And I love the fact that this has been really driven by adult social services, but also linking in with housing and planning and with our other colleagues too. So that's what I want to say at the very beginning. It's been a real joy to do this work. I'm going to take a slightly different lens. I'm going to take the lens of what we learned actually by a piece of work that we did just before the housing work. And that was a piece of work to look at how we could transform the care market. Could we go to the first slide, please, Sally? So during COVID, we wanted to look at what were our priorities for adult social care, market shaping and development. And as part of that, we decided that a really important part of that is to how we engage with people with lived experience of adult social care services. I have to confess at this point, we did it rather late in the process. We started doing what people do, writing documents, sending out drafts, getting comments, and then it was a stakeholder engagement part of it. And I was pulled up really, you know, quite rightly so. Why haven't you involved us at the very beginning? We need to be involved at the beginning. This is what co-production is all about. So we appointed an organisation called Curators of Change, who are a small enterprise of people with really diverse experience, great experience of working with people with lived experience, and many of those people were working with Curators of Change. And we ran a public engagement process, which we thought would be fairly short, 3 months over the summer, and then we'd be done, get the views and move on. But actually, it was a very lengthy process. And one of the things that we learned was actually proper engagement, proper co-production takes time. It takes time to really listen and to really understand and really learn what's working well or not. And, you know, we needed to do that in order to make sure that the market shaping work we're doing, the emerging new care market, was fit for purpose and was going to be appropriate for people using those services. So we did different workshops, story gathering, lots and lots of listening, lots of talking and lots of learning. Now, within that process, we had quite a lot of feedback on housing. And actually what people were saying was, look, we need good housing development, but you developers, you out there can't do it without hearing our views, because we live in those houses and we have needs, and we need to live in houses that are adaptable and fit for our purposes. And how can you do that without listening to us and without us being part of that process? Next slide, please, Sally. So out of this whole process, we realised that we need to create much better conditions for people to feel valued and connected, those people who are going to use the services. Because what people were saying was, look, what you're proposing is okay, it's fine, we can't really find fault with it, but what we do find fault with is the way that we are treated, the way that we are not given consideration that we need to have consideration given to. And we need to be working together with you. We need to be working in co-production, and we need to be able to have our voices heard and to know that we're part of the process as equal partners. So we decided that moving forward in ADASS East, we would create a level of accountability between ADASS East and us, with the people that we want to work with. And we learned that proper engagement needs to have proper time. And in terms of moving on with housing, the housing piece of work, we need to co-produce housing solutions together. Next slide, please, Sally. So as a result of this stakeholder engagement, what are we doing differently? So we have got this renewed commitment to co-production with people with lived experience of adult social care and care services. We've established an over the brew, we're calling it at the moment, which is a series of listening events, again run by curators of change, open to all people who access care and support, with the people, for the people, run by the people. And actually people with experiences plus commissioners or professionals are invited to those sessions to really talk together and have an open and honest dialogue about what it's like and what we can do differently and what we can do differently together. And around the same time as this work was ending and we're moving on to the next stage, which was the housing work, we decided to establish a regional housing group. And we already had a body of people who have been very articulate and very helpful and very vocal that we could actually draw into this group. And from the very outset, people like Mark and his colleagues have been part of that process. Claire will talk more about how we actually did that, how we got the group together, how the group worked, and how we got to where we got to at the end. But we were building on a really important foundation stone of co-production with our people with lived experience, and I'm really grateful to Curators of Change and the people that we have worked for within that process. That's my piece. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Jeremy, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself, so apologies. I was just saying thank you, Gillian. It demonstrates how co-production has been at the heart of this. And I know from the Housing LIN's perspective, we're also working with Essex Cares through our HAPPI project, looking at technology. And again, co-production needs to be wedded not just around sort of the bricks and mortar. It needs to look at all aspects of community living. I'm sure that's a point that Mark will emphasise and reiterate when we come to him. But delighted that we could also be joined by Claire, and Julie mentioned Claire. So Claire, over to you in terms of the housing and development piece from Luton Borough Council. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jeremy. I just want to talk a little bit about how we went from not having any sort of guides to having a beautiful document, which you can see in my hands. If you go to the next slide. We obviously have talked about the white paper and how important it is that housing is a part of decisions about care. This is presumably slightly preaching to the converted, so I won't go into that in great detail, but just wanted to say that I was really excited to see this in the white paper, because I've spent about the last 10 or so years of my 25 years of housing career really nudging around the edges of quite a lot of this agenda around integrated health, housing and social care, and other agendas as well. Move on. So when I took a call in February that said, oh, we're doing this piece of work on housing, would you be interested in being involved? It was brilliant, because it was the first time I felt like I'd been actively invited. Not that, I mean, I've had contact with ADASS East before and the LIN and been involved in various things, but I really appreciated, as a sort of housing person, that active invitation. that, you know, there was no matter of trying to convince social care colleagues that they ought to think about housing. It was absolutely social care colleagues saying, we think about housing, we think it's important, let's have a conversation, let's do something. And that was just fantastic. So I'm really pleased to have been part of this project all the way through. Moving on. So what did we do? Basically, we started out by saying, well, kind of who do we need in the room? We didn't have a lot of time for this piece of work. It was a fairly short, short piece of work, short time scale. So we brought together and really thought about, well, who we needed in the conversation, and that was, you know, housing organisations from a kind of local authority level, both two-tier authorities, districts and unitaries, housing providers, developers, planners, social care, funders such as Homes England, and also obviously the people with lived experience who were there from the very start, thanks to the work that had already happened at ADASS East that Gillian's talked about. And I think we really focused as well, reflecting on Julie's point about across social care and DASS experience, not everyone has the opportunity to touch into housing as well, and particularly where organisationally that's separate. That's really important to make sure we get that connection in right to the district councils. So we brought together a steering group, which was around 25 people. There was quite a lot of different experience around the room, and we had just a few meetings really that focused on, scoping some work, really deciding what we wanted to do, talking about how that goes forward, how we promote and gather the information and make sure that we stay in touch with the lived experience. And we did basically all of that within the space of really a few hours, because there were only a handful of meetings. So one of the most important elements was about that scoping. So we agreed that we would, just for this project, focus on new homes. And that, obviously, you might imagine that there are lots of homes in the country, but very few of them are actually new. So that gives you a very limited scope to start with. And that really helped. And actually, what was really reassuring there was the conversations that we had with the broader ADASS East group, which were saying, this isn't a one-time only thing. This is the first of a number of pieces of work that we want to do on housing. And then we go, okay, we're going to focus on new build. And we also wanted to look about, across the social care spectrum, all different sorts of client groups. And what was interesting to me was about how that focus shifted, the way that we thought about the information shifted as the time went on. So I think we came into it with a sort of feeling like, well, we would do a guide and there would be a chapter on learning disability, and there would be a chapter on old people, and there would be a chapter on mental health, whatever it was. Actually, that's not how it came out in the end, because people are more complex than that, and systems are more complex than that. And actually, the way that we felt about organising that information changed over time as well. And I'll come to it in more detail on that when I talk about how it's worked in the guide. To move on. So, very brief timeline of what we did. We got together for the first time in February. We met monthly up until about May. We started out by just agreeing what we were as a group. We did some specialist conversations specifically with creators of change and with the people with lived experience. And we had a small editorial group, or smaller editorial group, which went through all the case study examples, decided which ones we wanted to feature. And then we had a specialist conversation with the co-production group around how are we reflecting the quality of co-production in each of these case studies, taking them all on their own merits with a co-production lens. And that was a really interesting piece of work as well. So we had an outline draft by June, and we've basically worked on doing a launch event and signing off the actual document. And as I say, the actual document was launched last month in October. And we've published the guide, which is now available online. And it wouldn't be fair to say any of this without mentioning Trish Reid, who from day one was amazing and brought it all together, did all the hard graft and then some, and actually wrote the guide. So, definitely thanks to Trish, because she did go over and above with her commitment on this project. Moving on. So in terms of how we've structured stuff in the guide, you'll find there isn't a chapter on this cohort and a chapter on that cohort. We've focused a little bit more around what's possible. So what's the examples of good practice in the built environment sense in terms of new homes, but also how's it made possible? Because we were really interested in where we've had examples of really great new housing. Did they emerge from an operating environment, or did they emerge in spite of an operating environment, which sometimes happens and definitely does happen. But more to the point, where do they emerge as a result of an operating environment in which there is good partnership, that there's good strategic collaboration, that there are models of delivery around understanding land value, around making sure that the right partners work together at the right time, that the right interventions happen. How do we make sure those things happen? Because actually, if we can get that that integrated kind of organisational infrastructure right, in theory, these good examples of actual built schemes flow naturally from that, ideally, and they don't have to happen in spite of that system. We want it to work as much as possible as a result of a good system, and that's especially important in the light of the way that we're working now across integrated care systems with health. Yeah, we want to make sure that those operating systems with strategic work, the right people in the room, talking to the right strategic interventions at the right time is so important. So yeah, so where we've talked about how the guide is put together, that's how we've organised that information. Moving on. So as I say, at the launch event last month, we had around 80 people there from a really good range of organisations. Again, planners get a lot of, I'm a big fan of planners too, Julie and I agree on that. A lot of what you want to achieve, it turns out you really need to get it into planning policy. So you need a lead-in time for that. So that's a big learning point for many people, I feel. Making sure that we've got the right, we had people from health, we had people who have lived experience, we have people from all different local authorities, housing providers, developers, architects, all sorts. And we had loads of great speakers who are featured in the guide talking about the work that they've done. And great networking, really good thinking about how we can use that information to work better together. Moving on. So there you go. That's a copy of the guide that I'm waving at my camera now. It's available on the ADASS East website. I'm sure we'll send a link around. And just as a sort of personal reflection, I've really valued being involved in this piece of work. It's been such an honour to chair the working group and get involved in the conversations all the way through, the work with the co-production people, the work on the launch, all of it. I think for me, some of the really great learning is about how that co-production infrastructure works best. Like, we could not have delivered this guide with good co-production input, with people with lived experience input. And everyone lives somewhere, right? So everyone's got a place that they can call home, and making sure that place that they can call home is the right place for them. That everyone's got lived experience, but so important to get that co-production input. And if it hadn't been for the work that ADASS East had already done, the work that they'd done to put in place that joint work with Creators for Change, we would never have been able to deliver a project like this with that level of input. So that was very important. And again, this thing about connecting people, translators and connectors, people have different terminology, people have different timescales for staff, people need to understand where other professional lines are coming in. And I think that's been something that I really valued in this piece of work, getting people together and learning from each other. And again, for me, it's about, there's some really great schemes out there, there's some really good examples out there, but I'm really interested in where those things happen because of the system that they come from, not in spite of them. And I think we've had some amazing examples of that. Quick shout out for the Essex land value model, which really have been rating for years. So pleased to be able to feature it in the guide. And I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more on the work in Richmond and Wandsworth about what they're doing at a kind of built environment level, because that's something I absolutely want to take back to Luton, and I've been plugging away with colleagues about. Again, the good thing about a good practice guide is you can learn from it and take it back to where you're working, and that's absolutely what I'm doing with this. So that's me. Thank you.
Claire, thanks ever so. That's a really good session there, and I think what you've described there is a mix about, you know, how systems and people have come together to really work on producing something that's meaningful, not just that's going to sit on the shelf, and, you know, and something about that can be applied. And what I also liked about it, it's also about tenure diversity, dwelling type diversity. It's about inclusion, adaptability, access. And, you know, it's a whole gambit. And so thanks ever so for sort of giving that overview. And there was a question in the Q&A box saying, you know, where can we get the guide? You mentioned the ADASS website. It's also on the Housing LIN Eastern Region website as well. And that's just been posted in the box. But one of the things that everybody said so far is about, you know, the lived experience, understanding co-production, and we really wanted to hear from Mark about, you know, what makes a home a home. So, Mark, over to you. Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. I know you've had a busy day already.
I have had a busy day, but it's been fantastic to be invited to this. So thanks very much, Jeremy. And also thanks everyone of the people in the room that have been part of the process, especially as I've been part of the process of this with people like Jill and Claire and Trish and Julie and everyone, and sort of seeing the process at first hand. It's wonderful that Jill actually said about, and she made comment about that very quickly, ADASS East was pulled up and actually said, you know, sort of this really, you know, sort of co-production isn't taking place here, you know, maybe you need to do that. And I think that was fundamental, because I think that what the great thing that I'm never going to take away from this is that things were actually changed by the point of actually saying that, you know, so sort of things where that you actually pointed out that, you know, this may, yeah, you're getting people around a room, but this possibly isn't co-production, was actually listened to, and this is where that, you know, that is a great takeaway from me. Claire is not the only one that's got the guide in front of them. I've got the guide too. I love the guide. It's almost like put onto the sort of like plinth in my flat when you walk in, and it's like sort of there, and people go, what's that there? So, just a wonderful piece of history being made, because what I just want to say is that co-production is a thing, and of course many people might think it's a buzzword or a buzz phrase. For a long time now I've been passionate about co-production. If people do know me, I'm probably, if you cut me in half, I'm like a bit of a stick of Blackpool rock where co-production is going through, because for me, I'm a person with lived experience at the heart of this. I have used adult social care. I have had in Essex, I have had health, social care, and also I've had a home that has been given to me, but I must admit the way that it was for me wasn't a particular pleasant experience. That's history, it's gone. Because the great thing now is we're looking forward, and we're going to fly the flag of people that I've got to use services are going to be working with everyone else and being around the table. A lot of people fear co-production as well, because I think a lot of people think, oh dear, you know, sort of we've got people with lived experience there and we've got us, and sometimes it is a fearful process. And I think that what we've tried to do, and what curators have changed to, because I'm here with 2 hats on, which is pretty good for me normally, because I've normally got about 5 or 6 hats, that I represent myself as a person with lived experience, or living experience, because lived experience is in the past. I still live my life every day, but I also represent Curators of Change, and Curators of Change is an organisation that really does give people who have got the t-shirt, so to speak, the voice. And if you get the guide, and please do download it or get it, you know, sort of, I don't know whether there's hard copies available, but I was lucky enough to be asked with Julie to write a joint forward, and I started off with a phrase about that from a famous film, which is "There's no place like home," and there is no place like home, but it doesn't necessarily only mean about the roof over your head or the walls around you. The place of home means is the facilities correct around where you live? Is there green spaces? Is the environment fit for purpose? Is your home actually fit for purpose for you? Because sometimes people and local authorities will give a space, a house, but sometimes it's not actually fit for purpose because maybe the person's in a wheelchair and you've given the person a 3-step, sort of going up to their front door. Is the doctors around the corner, or are they in reach by public transport? That is all needing to be looked at where a place is a home. It's not about that you close the door and the front door and it's that. It's actually about the whole point. Home is life and life is home. And I also was proud to see that within the document there is a 2-coded system, or a wonderful sort of practice of that. There's a gold star, which means it's been excellent co-production been used, and there's also a balloon, which means that, well, sort of things have happened but it could be better. And I think that this is where the actual guide shines out from anywhere, because I've not seen anything lately, and I've been around quite a while, unfortunately, where I've seen such co-produced and co-designed documents. And I think that this is where we have to, again, as I said, fly the flag. I'm not saying everything's perfect, because I'm always one of these people, not a glass half full person or a glass half empty. I'm always a person that, I would always give myself 9 out of 10, because there's that one point that you can always strive for. But I think that we are really a good 9.9 with this document. I think that the ways that we've opened up dialogue, we've had professionals, and at the launch event last month, it was fantastic to hear from people who actually said to me about sort of, how do I actually get people that we don't normally get, those people that we, I mean, you get hold of me quite easily because I've got a big mouth, but there are a lot of people that you can't get hold of, and that's the hard to reach groups. Now, I say that really bad because I don't believe there's hard to reach groups. I just think that we don't have the mechanism, or we don't have the foresight to get those people around the table. And this is where we have to start doing something different. I saw in the comments and questions about how do we get people from ethnic minorities? How do we get people from the LGBT community? I'm a gay man. I remember being spoken to with regards to my sexual orientation. It's like I was told, well, what's that to do with this? Well, there's a lot to do with this, because, my thoughts are equally as relevant and equally as important as everyone else. And this is where we need to be starting to open up the dialogue and look at people as people, rather than the client number that you get, or the NHS number, or the social care case notes that you might get. I'm going to shut up now, but I want to just end to the point of what I ended with the launch event. And launch event is that I can't show it because I've got the background on, but also it's over there and I don't want to move everything around. But I've got a wonderful sort of picture on the wall, and it's of Audrey Hepburn, the wonderful actress. And next to her, it's saying that nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. And if you look at impossible, you break it and it's I'm possible. And I gave a little I suppose really a little task to the people that were there, and hopefully I'll give a task to the people listening in for this webinar today. If you're worried about co-production, if you're worried about how you are engaging with people that use services that you are there to provide for, try and just tomorrow, because I'm sure you don't want to go back now to work or whatever, but put it on a post-it note, something like that, stick it by put it on your laptop or put it on your computer at work, so it's visible and it's there all the time, and just keep looking at that. So if you've got that chance to co-produce, make it possible. You can make it possible, and you'll find it very, very easy, because sometimes we're not different people from different planets, we're only human beings exactly like you, but we can really help you and make your organisation and make your projects the best we possibly can, because we're all hopefully singing on the same hymn sheets. You're going to be there to give us wonderful properties and wonderful homes and wonderful environments, and we're going to be living in a wonderful environment and wonderful property. So be possible, and thank you again for inviting me to be here, and thank you. And as I ended my little dialogue in the book, in the publication, I put there, thank you for giving the voiceless a voice. Thanks.
Well, and thank you for articulating that voice so beautifully this afternoon, Mark. That was brilliant. And I think, as Claire said, I think she talked about the art of the possible, and you're talking about be possible. So good link there as well. So thanks ever so. And just a reminder, if you do have any questions, do put them in the chat box. We will come to all of them at the end of the presentation. And our final set of presentations are from two fantastic OTs, Rachel Wood and Jekyll Reynolds. In fact, Rachel, I think you recently wrote a blog for the Bristol Festival Ideas around the spirituality of adaptations and home as well. So that's another session plus, as opposed to today. And Jekyll, we've known each other through a number of years around home improvement and inclusive design and the role of OTs in that, especially the adaptations without delay. So over to you to give the examples from your localities.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting us. We're really delighted to be able to share with you a bit about how we're working in the London boroughs of Wandsworth and Richmond. And just absolutely delighted that our work has been included in this guide as well. And in summary, our job is to ensure that the new homes in our boroughs are designed and built to be inclusive and accessible and adaptable. And we work with various colleagues and departments to ensure that we achieve this goal. And we'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Our PowerPoint is quite photograph led, so we've included these to give you an idea of the way we're working and the work we're doing. Wandsworth and Richmond are very varied boroughs. They're very different to each other and within the boroughs as well. And as you can see, at times we're involved with one-off bungalow sites and at other times, and mostly, we're involved with much larger housing developments. Next slide, please, Sally. But a little bit about our history, really, and our story. So 10 years ago, our boroughs only had occupational therapists working in our adult and children's social services departments, but we would help out our housing colleagues occasionally. And I was asked to go and view some new builds in the borough. These were both new council and new housing association builds. But I found that they hadn't been built or designed as accessible. And this was even basic things like door width and inaccessible thresholds. And the new wheelchair user homes had baths and standard kitchens and no lifts installed. So for those new wheelchair user homes, we were then having to spend an average of £25,000 per home to post-adapt them. That was 10 years ago, so imagine what the cost would be now. And that was either using our own council funds or disabled facilities grant money. And not to mention the hours of work for our own specialist surveyors and our occupational therapists who are having to oversee those adaptations. So along with one of the assistant housing directors and our head of housing enablement, I helped to create a new post for Wandsworth. So these posts did exist in other places around the country and particularly in other parts of London, but not in Wandsworth or Richmond. But we designed a post, a specialist occupational therapist sitting in our housing department, paid for by Section 106 money, so quite a creative use of that money, working with planners and architects from the very, very beginning of the process. And then this was all the way through from build to completion and then matching these new homes appropriately to people on our waiting lists. And I have to say at this point, I'm so grateful. There were such generous colleagues in other councils where this role already existed who gave so much help and advice. And Jax was one of them in Waltham Forest before we managed to pinch her for Wandsworth. And at the beginning, this was all fine, but as the developments increased and our own in-house regeneration and development teams expanded, I was beginning to drown. So 3 years ago, our regeneration team who work on major sites in Wandsworth, they decided to employ their very own specialist housing occupational therapist, and in what seems to be quite a unique role. And Jax took that post up and she'll tell you a little bit more about this in a moment. So my role is now focused solely on new builds across both boroughs, Wandsworth and Richmond. I work with our in-house development team who now fund part of my role themselves, as well as being part funded by development and part funded by Section 106. And our development team are designing, building new council homes on little infill sites, plus they're building new supported housing developments, which I'll mention in a moment. And I also work with housing associations across both Richmond and Wandsworth, and mainly focusing on their wheelchair accessible homes just due to the volume of developments that they have. So at the moment, I'm currently working on about 60 housing developments over 2 boroughs, mainly residential developments between 4 and 1,000 homes per site. But I'm also involved with student accommodation, 2 large co-living schemes, 2 extra care housing schemes, and 2 supported housing developments. And I think we could easily use another 2 or 3 OTs across the department as our work increases for projects like decent homes and sheltered housing refurbishments. We already have a 3rd housing occupational therapist, Rebecca, who I think is attending today. And she was employed at the end of last year, and we work really closely with her. She's a brilliant addition to the team. She works with the specialist surveyors in the Home Improvement Agency, and she helps our housing allocation team match new homes to those who need them. Next slide, please, Sally. So the guide specifically focused on putting people at the heart of the new housing developments. So I just want to chat a little bit about how our roles meet this vision. And as the guide mentioned, as occupational therapists, our training experience means that we gain in-depth understanding around the daily barriers experienced by those who are older and who are disabled. All of us have worked with residents who have lived in unsuitable accommodation, often poorly designed, often with institutional adaptations and equipment. Jax and I have both worked and listened to residents for over 20 years. We've both worked in social care and housing, so we understand both departments. And our experience of working with residents has inspired us to try and do things differently. And we believe that our role helps us primarily to put residents firmly at the centre of new developments. One major issue which can be really disrupting for our residents is to have their homes adapted. But in new build developments, we have the perfect opportunity to design and build homes which are truly adaptable and accessible. And this is both homes for wheelchair users, but also those which are built to the equivalent of lifetime home standards, which is now called Category 2 accessible and adaptable. And it means that our new homes should either be built out as accessible already or be easily adaptable, so that disruption is minimised. Another advantage of designing and building this way is that it meets the green agenda, because we're future-proofing homes and we're not having to rip out newly fitted bathrooms and kitchens to fit accessible versions. Then there are also considerable cost savings. We aim to protect the Disabled Facilities Grant and council funds so that money is not wasted on post-adapting new build homes. It also ensures that our colleagues in both housing and adult and children's social services don't have to waste their time in post-adapting new properties. And then the way that we're designing and building is also enabling us to move away from institutional looking adaptations and designs. Now, I'm sure you've all been in public toilets with excessive and ugly grab rails and really institutional looking products. And that's actually a really good example of what we don't want our homes to look like. And I find a really good way of getting the message across is simply to ask our developers particularly, would you want this in your own home? And they usually get the point. Nobody wants to live in a home which reminds them of being in a hospital or living in a public toilet. People want their homes to be homely and contemporary as well as functional. And we've popped a few photos on that slide just to give you an idea of what our new homes look like. And just noting that these are council and housing associations, so we don't have endless pots of money. We haven't got all the really expensive fixtures and fittings in, but hopefully you can see that we still managed to make them look contemporary and homely. And then another really important aspect is that we gain feedback through post-occupancy evaluation questionnaires from our new residents. And that helps us to learn lessons, and it helps us to adjust future designs. And we actually write in to our briefs some of those changes that we've made because of resident feedback. Next slide, please. So thinking just a bit more about co-production. So we work directly with our residents, but we also work with colleagues from other departments throughout the council and with external colleagues. We work really closely with planners, and I am also a massive fan of planners. We work with architects, developers, housing association, product manufacturers. We work really closely with Rebecca, our new housing OT, who matches these homes to applicants on the waiting list. She works with our allocation teams. I'm starting to work with people who are purchasing shared ownership properties to ensure that any additional adaptations are completed prior to move-in. And Jax will tell you about her work with residents in the regeneration areas. But this is a really fitting point today, particularly with the guide. And another really important aspect of our work is with social service colleagues. In the development team, we're building supported accommodation in partnership with our adult social services commissioning and our social work colleagues. And we liaise with them from the very earliest stages, from early design right through to the completion of the scheme. And Stag House, which is in the photo here, was our first council-built supported housing scheme. We have a second on site and a third in design stages. They're not perfect, but we're learning lessons as we go along, and the lessons we learn from the first scheme we put into practice in the second scheme, and so on. And I'm also working with our commissioning and our housing association colleagues on a supported scheme in Richmond Borough. In addition to this, we have 2 large extra care housing developments currently on site in the borough, and another one sort of in planning stages. And Jax and I are both working on these with our adult social service colleagues, as well as with housing associations and developers. And I believe that our social service colleagues are really grateful for our involvement because I think they know that we have the skills and knowledge needed to ensure that these schemes are built as fit for purpose. And they've actually just asked me to work with the commissioning team on a refurbishment project for one of their current extra care housing schemes in the borough. Next slide, please, Sally. So what else do we do? So as well as all that co-production, we are invited to be involved with policy discussions to ensure that good practice around inclusive and accessible housing is included both in planning and housing department policies. This is much tighter than when I first started. So right at the beginning, much of what I achieved was really through building good relationships with developers and housing associations and just calling in a lot of favours with them. With our housing policy colleagues, I'm currently helping to write sections of our next housing and homelessness strategy. As I said, we work with our housing OT colleague, we work with social services and housing colleagues, but also we identify people on the waiting list with very specific housing needs who might just not sort of fit into the standard adapted homes that we build. And so we try and match them to new homes in the pipeline. We run training sessions with colleagues within the council. We research new products, but we also work with product companies to ensure we're using good quality products with contemporary design. So, for example, I've just been liaising with about 7 major kitchen manufacturers who build accessible kitchens, build and produce accessible kitchens. And some of them weren't producing compliant accessible kitchens. And with the 7 that I've talked to, they're all now providing kitchens, or hopefully will be providing kitchens that do actually meet the needs and are fit for purpose. And as well as being included in this guide, I achieved a staff award for our own council, and Jax and I were recent finalists for the MJ Awards in their category for building innovation in diversity and inclusion. So we know that our role ensures that we're building homes which are fit for purpose and where people can build community and where they can flourish, but it's also really encouraging to have this work recognised elsewhere. I'm now going to hand over to Jax for a little bit more information about what we're doing, but also she's going to give a more detailed look into her quite unique role. Thank you. Over to you, Jax.
Thanks, Rachel. My Wi-Fi was playing up a bit early, so if I turn off my camera, do apologise, but I've also realised I'm a bit lit up. It's a bit odd. But yeah, just following on from Rachel, some of you might know that I've worked in this field for quite a while now. And I guess just to give a wee bit of a background at me, so for quite a while I've worked in sort of wider accessible inclusive design. I did a master's in it a long time ago, and I still currently sit on a British Standards Committee that oversees accessible and inclusive built environments. So because of all that, I do feel it's sort of helped influence the work that I do within Regen, and really touches, I guess, on Mark's point in that it's not just the home, but it's the neighbourhood, the landscaping, streetscape. So I'll come on to all that a bit later as well. And just, I mean, we only put a few guides up, but there is such a plethora of oh, sorry, it was the previous slide, but never mind. There was such a sort of plethora of design guidance, thank you. What I've also done is really try and address missing detail. So it started out as it was just a wheelchair site brief for our first phase in the regeneration, but it's sort of morphed into a bit more than that. So we've now got, I've written an overarching document on accessible inclusive housing design, and then one specifically for category 2 and one for category 3, but really just to address all that missing detail and provide explanations and address common misunderstandings around building regs, and as Rachel's touched on, sort of draw from our experience and lessons learned through design and build, but critically working with people in their own homes, just understanding barriers that the home environment creates. Next slide, please. So yeah, back to the slide. So at the moment I'm predominantly involved on there are 2 main estate regenerations. One is currently under review, but the one I'm predominantly involved with is called Winstanley York Road or York Gardens. So it's just behind, for those of you who know central London, behind sort of Clapham Junction and the river. But it's a large estate regeneration. The estate was sort of built in 60s, 70s. So you can see on the left quite sort of brutalist, not very pleasant architecture, and it's a phased demolition and decant of residents over many years, and eventually it will provide up to about 2,500 homes, as well as, a school, church, and other things like children's health and leisure centre, library, shops underneath flats, and it'll all be around a large central park. The first phase completed this year, with the second also starting site. So just briefly, council tenants, the main aim is that council tenants will have the homes re-provided, and there are a variety of options within that, which includes an early move option, right to return, and that's why we're also doing some of these other satellite sites, so that people can move out the estate and then we could demolish. I mean, it's all quite a long, complicated move and phasing, but critically, part of our offer to residents, and which links to my role, is to ensure that new homes meet residents' needs. So as the project officers visit residents, I mean, they basically have to visit everyone and do what's called the housing needs assessment. So often they'll come and say to me, Jax, can you come and visit this particular person? And it's at that point I would get involved and determine any specific requirements. But in 2017, there was something called a joint venture set up. So that was between Wandsworth Borough Council and Taylor Wimpey. By setting up what's called this joint venture, it basically gives the council greater control than if it had just sold the land. So we do basically have a say over what it is we want in terms of the development. And in 2019, thanks to Rachel, my post was set up. I mean, as you can probably see, was completely overwhelmed, and Regen really wanted her to help, but she just didn't have the capacity. So yeah, so this post was set up. I'm not actually aware of any other specific housing OT posts in an estate regeneration, so I think it is quite unique. And just in terms of community engagement and co-production, the Regen team do and have done an amazing amount of work, and some, just to list a few of the examples, of things like ongoing exhibitions, workshops. We have regular festivals. We've had projects with local groups to design a house or a flat for the future, making Lego, workshops where community design and make items for the public realm to try and improve it whilst all the work's going on. Trying to give residents doorstep access to jobs and training, things like future skills training. And we've also set up our local volunteering network and food sharing service. And quite a lot of that happened through COVID as well. And latterly, we have had an interior design competition for local young people to design a show flat so that we can show residents what our new housing is going to look like. Next slide. Sorry, just back. I think this should be back. That's it. Yeah, I'm not going to dwell on this too long because I'm aware of time, but this just gives you a bit of an overview of everything that I do. So it's really getting involved from pre-planning to post-occupancy, but actually past post-occupancy. So when people are moving in and adapting, so I get involved right through and with basically everybody and anybody involved and residents. Next slide, please. So, yeah, that's it, thanks. So these are just a few photos, just showing some of the fixtures and fittings that I proposed in the first phase, just through experience gains on previous projects, and again, working with people in their own homes. And we're now more or less adopting most of these products and similar sort of principles for all housing, so across regeneration and development, and constantly learning from lessons learned on site and with residents as we go along. So just quickly, the communal areas, so it's just about thinking about consideration to lighting, tonal contrast. We've used easy to use slam shut locks, which can be automated in future, and video entry phones, accessible door openings and thresholds. Doors, windows and thresholds are, in my view, one of the biggest barriers to access. So just really trying to think about everything right down to product detail. And I'm fortunate enough to literally get involved in specifying everything. And we try and do this across all housing, so not just wheelchair accessible, but all our housing. And also just everyday things like base taps, sink taps that you can fill pots and pans up from the drainer. Again, just things that are functional. As I said, well, not only multi-functional, adaptable, but one thing that Rachel touched on earlier and that we're very passionate about is that they look nice, that they're aesthetically pleasing, and just, I guess, follow principles of inclusive design. But again, going back to Rachel's point, all of this would provide savings to adaptations budgets. So again, and also social care and health, and ultimately really enabling people to live in their homes for longer with less disruption. But not only in terms of adaptability, it provides equity for tenants and benefits in terms of ongoing maintenance. So even things like estate management, they know what products we're putting in, everything that's put in is sort of run past our electrical, technical, entry people. So everybody's sort of getting involved and understanding what the products are. But again, also in terms of things like future lettings, certainly for council dwellings, they'll be much easier to let. Like one example is our shower seat is height adjustable when we put it in, so we're not having to rip it out and put it back in. Next slide. So one thing that we are doing, which I think is quite unique, is actually really doing like accessible and fully adaptable. So in our bathrooms for a general needs housing, which in London is M42, we're actually fitting wet floor showers and then fitting baths over that. But with everything else, we've had a few lessons learned from the first build. So now what we're paying particular attention to is things like making sure there's appropriate wall strengthening, putting wall mounted showers above the bath, nicer looking tiles. Yeah, we've got nicer sort of metro or larger rectangular tiles now. And if required, what I'll do is work with a resident to provide a specific adaptation specification. And we've generally had a really good uptake both before and after moving in, but also even more so now that residents are seeing what the design looks like, and feedback's been really positive. In terms of the spec, I've also developed a screening form for the team. And interestingly, they're now undertaking the next phase of housing assessments. And so far, it's almost 8 out of 10 people are saying they actually need or want a level access shower in their home. So again, this provides hopefully significant cost savings. I know Rachel, I saw a question in the Q&A about savings, and in terms of fixtures and fittings, Rachel did do a bit of a comparison, but I mean, we're saying it'll probably be a few extra £100 in comparison to, I mean, a standard shower adaptation is what, £6,000 to £8,000. So really, you know, hopefully that is significant cost savings. Next slide, please. And oh yeah, so almost there. As I mentioned, in part of my role is to visit and assess tenants' specific needs. This has included purchasing and adapting a couple of houses, but also just thinking about our next phase is what we're going to do with the next phase and the flats and buildings there. And again, these adaptations are funded by the regeneration team, so providing significant savings for adult social care, not only in terms of adaptations, but actually avoiding people having to go on OT waiting lists, have a referral and an assessment. So it just makes it much more streamlined as well. And as well as standard adaptations like showers and stair lifts, a couple of these photos show, so we converted a bedroom into a shower room and provided a wall-mounted height adjustable shower stretcher with a ceiling track hoist, fitted an electric, not thermostatic shower, sorry, with additional isolator valves. You can see them on the wall alongside the through floor lift, but this was really to stop a resident who constantly would run water and couldn't reach. But also in that same property, we put an enclosed through floor lift in because they needed somebody to be with them when they were going from the ground floor to the first floor. And also just other small things like installing an ensuite cupboard for plumbing for a washing machine off a bedroom, but just all quite specific things that were specific for that resident and met their needs. The reason I put this plan on there is on our next phase as well, what we've done is we have a particular family in mind, and they need a 6-bed, 10-person wheelchair accessible unit, but we're not entirely sure because obviously it's still a couple of years away. So what we've done is designed it so that it can be split into 2 3-bed, 5-person wheelchair accessible units, just really if people change, so that inbuilt flexibility is there. And next slide. Thanks. So yeah, thank you. I know it was a bit of a whistle stop tour, but what I thought I'd do is just put a couple of photos. This is one of the wheelchair accessible flats of our latest satellite sites, and residents are just in the process of moving in. But hopefully, like Rachel said, you can see that we've tried to design it inclusively and attractively, and certainly resident feedback has been absolutely fantastic, saying, oh, I can't believe this is a council flat. And so yeah, I mean there's definitely improvements to be made, but hopefully we're getting there. Thank you.
Well, you managed both of you to go through that real super quick time, but lots of rich information, and thanks for bringing really the adaptations bit to life, but also how critical it is for getting it right at the outset, because it's also about both the cost effectiveness and care effectiveness that we heard about from one of the questions, but also in terms of providing that tailored support to make people live independently as well, and how crucial that is. So thanks both of you for an excellent presentation. And I know Sally's put something in the chat box about the more information that the HousingLIN holds on the role of OTs and accessible housing design, which was initially crafted by, well, you'll know, Marnie Walker as well. So, okay, we've got a little bit of time for questions, about 10 minutes or so, and they've been coming in, flooding in, and also some comments. But I wanted to kick off with a dear friend of the LIN, Maria Brenton, because I think she goes right to the heart of, what is co-production, and she would be interested to know from the panel what we understand to be co-production. Is it different from just consultation or feedback? And I think it's a really important question, because I think from a housing perspective, often co-production is not fully understood because it's either seen from a health or social care direction. So Mark, could I invite you to kick off, and then I'll go around whoever else.
I was really interested in the question, because it was much more in the sense of, you know, like what is the meaning of life, because the situation of like co-production, it's so very different. I mean, as a person that co-produces, and, you know, as I said, with my two hats, curators of change and then as an independent co-producer, it'd be wonderful to actually say what we need is we need to have people in the room immediately, blank page, start off everything, and that's how we go. But I need to be mindful, and I need to be, you know, absolutely 110% sort of in my own head to actually say that's not always going to happen. What I would actually suggest to people, if they actually are thinking about co-producing, is look at the Think Local Act Personal, or TLAP's ladder of co-production, because that actually looks at the various different steps from bottom to top with all the varying points. So consultation, feedback, people in the room, even vox pop interviews, research, etc., to the very top where co-production is. And I think that this is what people need to start doing. There isn't a right or wrong answer here, but what I would try to suggest is for people in the room, if you're going to be co-producing, try and get people in as early as possible, and also be honest. If you're going to be doing something and it is just a consultation exercise, put it as a consultation exercise. But if you want to have people, like we've done with the co-producing of this co-produced document, that was where we had people in the room at the very beginning, and we started from A right the way through to Z. And I think that all we need to do is, again, it's that fear aspect, but try not to be, and also try to get organisations that are user-led as well. I mean, Jill and ADASS East got in contact with Creators of Change. There are lots of co-production organisations around. One is the Co-Production Collective, which used to be the UCL Centre for Co-Production. They will always give help and advice, but have a little bit of digging and get the TLAP ladder of co-production, and that will really help.
Thanks ever so, Mark. And I know other regions have got co-production. I think West Midlands ADASS have got the co-production network. But does anybody else want to come in on this point?
And can I just say they're brilliant, the West Midlands, because
yeah,
I've been seeing that all the time.
Rich Amos and others are a part of that. Sorry, Claire, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think one of the bits of learning that I did around this as well was thinking about what's meaningful co-production and being willing to have those conversations, because in a housing sense, the chances are, if you're talking to people who live or living experience, as Mark rightly says, about some practical issues around housing design, you're very, very rarely going to be designing that building specifically for that person. And some of those needs are always very individual. But just because you're not doing that doesn't mean you can't take some really important themes and learning from speaking to people who lived in living experience. So, you know, I think that one of the things that I would take away from this is there's a huge amount of relevant information that we can get when we're thinking about bringing new homes forward, even if we never speak in beforehand to the people who will eventually live in those homes. It's a way of paying it forward, I think, as well, for some people, that, you know, we had some really useful and, you know, nitty-gritty conversations about the plug sockets are in the wrong place. We had a bathroom where they put the mirror in the wrong place. Real basic stuff, but absolutely makes a difference to people's everyday quality of life. And it's that kind of, those experiences help to make sure that our future design is better. So that, yeah, there's never a point at which you can't have that conversation, is one thing I would have taken away.
And Gillian, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I think you know, we add a lot. I think Claire and Mark have given great answers, and I just think, you know, just don't wait to get a perfect process. I think you know, where your heart's coming from is really important. So have you got a real desire to understand? Have you got a real desire to listen? Have you got a real desire to give time? Have you got a real desire to say, actually, I don't know the answers? Bit of humility, bit of, you know. And I think just start, you know, and don't be afraid, because they're people. You know, Mark said, you know, don't be frightened of us. We're people like you are, but don't be frightened. Just start and just see what happens and see what unfolds together and see what you can learn together.
Thank you. And Julie.
Just quickly, Jeremy, just to say that I invited Curators for Change to come and work with colleagues in the council, not just adult social care, children's colleagues, housing colleagues, and I think it was Kat actually, Mark, said to me at the end of the session, I think they've all had to go and have a lie down. Because actually what they thought was co-production was more like engagement. So I think it is fundamentally different, and colleagues, please do look at that ladder that I know Sally's put into the chat, because it is something different, but so worthwhile and so valuable.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I echo that. Look, there are lots of great questions coming through, and also I think Rachel and Jax in particular, you've hit a nerve with a number of people who are talking about how important OTs are as part of this process. Rather than go through all of them, there's one in particular around sort of accessing content and documents. So I think Nicole asked, do you have details on your shower bathrooms? Will the floors need to be replaced once bath removed? And Jaquel, I think you had Jax, I think you wanted on.
Yeah, I tried to answer, but something went wrong. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where being involved right from the outset helps. So we are putting actual former tray, like recessed trays under in the floor. So it is like a proper wet room, really. So that's where we need to get in right at the start. I mean, I sort of touched on it in that because we are the council in a joint venture, we can require that. But I know like Rachel and colleagues in development are also trying to do it. I mean, I guess we do have a bit more sway in terms of council, but it's something I'm really trying to cost out, because I do think the long-term benefits far outweigh. But somebody in the chat had also said a lot of it is about evidencing cost. But so we are like digging down, putting the trays in, putting a full code wet floor in, and that's why things like are critical, like where you put the shower, the riser rail. So we're thinking about all that right from the outset. So we're getting better and better. And my point about the shower was because previously we had the bath taps. Well, that's no good because you still then have to dig out the wall, put an actual shower on the wall. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely learning as I'm going along, and it's getting better. And I've got like a general specifications for what happens when the bath comes out. And that's why, I don't even remember from the photos, using those wall mounted height adjustable shower seats and combined shower riser rails basically meets most people's needs. So, and they look nice and they're very sort of functional. So yeah, it's trying to get a balance, but I also am aware that I'm probably in quite a fortunate position. But I just think, like with Rachel's role, if you had more housing OTs, I'm sure we'd save a lot of money.
Yep, that's a good plug, and also a good plug for the special interest group on housing for the OTs as well, for those people who aren't aware of it. Roseanne asks an interesting question though also, do you include any specific environmental issues around sensory requirements within the design and build? I know you've talked around wheelchair and physical, but any quick comments on sensory, either of you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much included. And so, yeah, part M that we have to comment on is very wheelchair and a sort of physical disability focus. But yeah, no, absolutely. That's what we do include. And certainly in the design guide that Jax has written, it's much more detailed in there. I think both of you tried to answer questions in the chat and it's not working. So please perhaps.
Yeah, I'll give my email too. Just to quickly say, for people that don't know, there's a new PAS 6463 just out, designed for the mind, and through the British Standards Committee that I sit on, and that although we managed to get something in it saying, although it generally applies to possibly more public buildings in the built environment, it equally applies to the housing setting. But on all those documents that we put up, we couldn't get everything up, but yeah, I mean, that's part of the aim of our guide, is to think way beyond just physical impairment. It's a whole lot more than that.
And I know it's a piece of work we're going to be working on with you and the University of Stirling and others, trying to look at more around inclusive living and look at how we collate and pull a lot of this documents together. look, we're heading towards finishing our happy hour and letting you all get off for a nice little drink, I hope, or something soft or stronger. Wendy Johnston has raised issues around the work that Skills for Care have done in terms of culturally appropriate care. I think that's in response to Bob Green's question. I think, Mark, you addressed that earlier. Again, a couple of interesting shout outs for the role of home improvement agencies. We've covered issues around the sort of the health and social care benefits. And just responding to Sue's request, yes, we will certainly share both the slides as well as the recording of this afternoon's session with you. But can I just see if there are any final comments that each of you would like to make, either from the questions you've seen in the Q&A box or generally? So should we start in the order we presented? So Julie first.
Get off mute then. Yes, what I would say to colleagues is please get on with it. We don't build a new house in a day. You've got to think ahead, get the partnerships and the discussions going, and think about the art of the possible. We need new housing in this country, so let's make sure it's the right sort of housing. There's no reason why we can't be more influential. I've got some great developments in my own council. There is absolutely no reason why all the other councils can't do the same. And wouldn't that make life so much better for so many people? So that's what I'd like to say, Jeremy. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Julie. Gillian?
So I would just like to say, start listening, start understanding, start talking, start doing. It is possible. Just get on and do it.
Claire?
Thanks, nothing more from me. Just thanks to everyone who's been here today, and do take a look at the guide.
Mark? Any final
read the guides, and also start getting rid of the faux production, which is the consultations and all that, and start doing co-production, and enjoy yourself while you're doing it. Because I tell you what, if you listen to me and people around the room and around the table with people like me, you're going to have a ball of a time, and it's going to be brilliant. I'm sure the people in this room like Jill and Claire will take that and tell you about that with me in the room. So thank you, and thank you for letting me be part of this.
Yeah, and I echo that, Mark, and can I also thank you and your colleagues for participating so effectively as well. So, and final words to Rachel and Jax.
Yeah, just to answer a couple of questions. One, yes, it's in London Plan and our local Wandsworth and Richmond Plan, which is really helpful, and that actually really makes a difference, and you get everything in policy. Yes, we do get pushback from developers and housing associations and other colleagues, but it is very much about relationships. So I think building relationships is really, really key, and I'd say that's a huge part of what we try to do.
Yep, and I guess it's not really about co-production, but yeah, just to echo what Rachel said, but also I think just to bear in mind, it's not a specialist add-on. This is like everybody's home we're talking about. It's like all housing. You know, you can find some really functional, nice products, good design. It's just not a specialist add-on. That's what people tend to pocket it as.
Well, I think that's a good way to finish, and I know from practically the flexibility, the sort of thinking about the whole system is something that's all very much in the role of OTs and your particular work across the councils. Look, we've run over slightly. I hope you don't mind. Thanks ever so for everybody who stayed on with us. I hope you all agree it's been a fantastic session. A big thanks to all our presenters this afternoon for both giving up their time, but also talking so eloquently around why this really matters and that art of the possible. But I am struck by what Mark said about moving from the impossible to I'm possible, and how we personalize this, because this is about all our futures and all our todays as well. If this is the first time that you've joined one of our happy hours, we normally run them every week on a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. But as I said, as we kicked off today's session, we're actually putting an additional one in on Thursday. And this is something that follows quite nicely from this guide, because it's with the Local Government Association and a recent report the HousingLIN wrote for them on housing our ageing population, and highlighting 6 or 7 other local authorities that have worked effectively across the country to develop that strategic outline that actually Julie touched on. And in fact, you were in the original report. So we're going to be looking at the refresh of that housing our ageing population report with Bristol City Council and Gloucestershire County Council. So taking both a unitary and a 2-tier approach. Can I also thank the team behind the scenes for putting on this afternoon session, and I hope it's all flowed seamlessly for everybody. And can I also wish you all a very happy evening, and I very much hope you can join us again at a future happy hour. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.